Hi everyone, welcome to the video. Today I'd like to talk about different components of a front-end system. So I have been receiving a lot of questions about how to deal with front-end system design and how to prepare for it. So I thought I would make a series of videos as it's not possible to cover everything in a single one. For today's video, we would like to focus on what are the important components of a front-end architecture. So these are the building blocks of any front-end architecture. It does not depend on what kind of system you're trying to build. Maybe in the next video, we can deal about the specifics of a particular type of system like an e-commerce. But today what I'm going to talk about is something that applies to all front-end system. And this is something that is going to be one of the major areas of focus in your front-end system design interview. So when you start building a front-end system, the first goal is to have a clear-cut product requirement, because if you don't know what you are trying to build, what problem you're trying to solve, you will not be able to take right call with respect to right technology, right? So once you have the product requirement ready, the first thing that you can focus on is the UI framework. It is very important because the design team uses the components from a specific framework to create their design. For example, if you have worked with designers, you would know that they can import buttons or different components of, let's say, MUI in Figma, and then they will create designs with respect to that. So you need to take a call about what UI framework that you are going to use so that design can start working on that. So the UI framework library that you're going to use depends on multiple criteria. The learning curve, how easy or hard is it to integrate with a JavaScript framework, be it React, Angular, or Vue. Who are the contributors of the library? Because you don't want to be stuck with a bug that is causing delays in your application development. Then it's also very important how good is the community support. You should be able to find resources online because there's always some issue that you will face. How good is the documentation? And then the availability of components, because you should have all the components that you may need in the application. For example, a drawer or a search bar or a table or different kind of input types. So you should have all those things. Now, once you've decided the UI framework, then comes the JavaScript framework that you'll be using. As I mentioned, you can go ahead with Angular, Vue, React based on the requirements. In order to choose which framework that you should go with, you should take a look at the underlying technology. For example, React's virtual DOM or the shadow DOM or different kind of technology that different frameworks are using. What benefit it brings to the overall application, be it fast renders, be it easier state management, be it uh, lower bundle size, because you don't want your application to have a bigger bundle size, which will basically result in delay in the loading time. So you want to take care of all these important factors. At the same time, it's also very important that you consider the documentation and the creators and other important stuff that we talked about, UI frameworks. So once you've decided that, you can focus on the state management. Now it depends on the product requirements, but there are like different types of state management. The local state, I'll give you an example from React. For example, if you use a use state or something like that, then you maintain a local state. Then you can always create a context and share the data among multiple components, be it a child-child relationship, right? And you can maintain the data in the context. You can also use external library like Redux or Movex. You can also maintain the state in the local storage or IndexedDB if you want a good querying capabilities, right? So it depends on the requirement. So these are the different kind of state management. In my personal opinion, use state or the local state is something that you can use when you have to like maintain data in one component, or if it's just something that is being passed as a prop to a child component. And if there is a lot of child-child relationship, then you can always go ahead with the context or Redux or Movex or any other computers in Vue or Vuex. And then for some data that you want to persist after after the page refresh, you can always use local storage to do that. So you have all of these options. So once you have chosen what kind of state management you want to go ahead with, now we can talk about the testing, what kind of testing libraries that we are going to use, what are different types of tests. Like for example, you have unit test, which will basically test a particular piece of code or the component or a function. And then you have integration test, which basically deals with how the different components interact with each other. Then you have an option for an end-to-end test, which basically checks the whole flow. So you can like use something like Cypress for that. React testing library is very good for integration tests. Then we can also decide on whether you want to write the application in JavaScript or TypeScript. What are the benefits of TypeScript, right? Like if you want your application to be type safe and you want to catch errors at the build time, right? So you can always go ahead with TypeScript, and it has a lot of other benefits. But it's basically your personal choice. But I would definitely recommend going ahead with TypeScript because this is something that all the enterprise level applications use. Then we can focus on the CI/CD pipeline. So as an engineer, it's very important to understand how to configure or write a CI/CD pipeline. A pipeline is basically a set of steps that gets executed on a particular trigger. A trigger can be something as simple as raising a pull request. So you want, let's say, a set of tests to be run every time when someone raises a pull request. So you need this to catch, let's say, some errors. You want to make sure that all tests are running properly. Your code changes are not causing failure in some other parts of the application. Uh, you can also write a pipeline to catch lint errors. You can also configure to make an automated deployment to your staging environment or production environment, depending on the requirement. Right, so you have a lot of options to configure, and this is a very important step in overall software cycle. You can go ahead with Jenkins, or you can write a drone pipeline. You have a bunch of other options. That's up to you, but make sure that you cover all the possible cases when the pipeline should run. So the next one that I would like to talk about is the build tool. So for example, if you're using React CRA, it used to come with Webpack as a build tool. Now, for example, there's White, which comes with Rollup plus ES build. You can also make your own configurations in the choice of library that you are using. So build tool is very important because it is going to generate your build, and that is going to be deployed in your server. So whatever system you're trying to build will more often than not will have a authentication, right? So you have to take a call between multiple auth providers, for example, Google or Okta or some other provider, or your, let's say, your company has something of an inbuilt system, you can use that as well. So it depends, right? But in order to make a choice, you have to consider the pricing, who is the provider, is it based on OAuth, OAuth2, how easy or difficult is it to integrate or implement in your application, right? So you have to take a call about all of these things. So another thing that I would like to focus on is the monitoring. Let's say you deployed your app in multiple regions and something starts failing. Let's say an API call starts failing, or your application is not loading, or it's taking too much time to load, or users are not able to access certain parts of the application. You want your system to be reliable enough to inform you in very quick time that something is not working. So how can you configure that, right? You can use something like Datatogram, right, which can keep a track of, let's say, load time, errors, and a bunch of other things. And then it can send you a notification, which you can make, which you can configure, and can send you a notification on Slack or phone or whatever, and then you can take action. So there are a few other tools to configure the same, but more or less everyone provides you an option to trigger notifications, send messages, configure that, okay, in let's say 5 minutes, if I get more than 100 errors or this many total percentage of user errors, then trigger a notification or something like that. So you can do those configurations. Now, something that applies more to the backend is the privacy and compliance, because different countries or different regions have their own privacy laws, right? So what data you can store, what data can expose, it all depends on the local governing laws, and you need to take care of that. As I mentioned, it's more of a backend thing, but again, so there are certain data that you have to mask in order before sending it to the backend or things like that. So you have to take care of that. So what's happening in the backend is a black box for us with respect to this interview, but we still need to understand how we want to talk to the backend. Is it going to be by REST API, GraphQL, or a WebSocket? Depends on the requirement. Let's say if you have a continuous stream of data that you need to send and receive, you can always talk to the backend via WebSockets. And similarly, every method has its own advantages and disadvantages. But yeah, you can discuss this as well. Let's say for a chat application, you can have a WebSocket connection that uh, reads the message and sends the message. So these were the components of any front-end system design. In the next video, we can talk about a specific problem statement, let's say e-commerce or chat application, something like that. And then we will dive deeper into a low-level design where we would like to focus on different component tree, what will be the different requirements with respect to that particular product, right? Maybe some product needs a payment system, some needs a map service or things like that. We can talk about that in the next one. In sometimes they also ask you to design a game or something like that. So we will also talk about that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So see you again in the next video, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel.